Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 39 of the True Crime All the Time podcast. I'm Mike Ferguson, and with me, as always, is my partner in true crime, Mike Gibson. Gibby, what is going on today?
Man, I'm just happy to be here.
Man, you're just always happy to be here.
Just happy to be here.
In 2016, California wife and mother Sherry Papini disappeared for 22 days. When she was found, she told authorities a detailed account of being kidnapped and tortured. Years later, in a stunning twist, Papini pled guilty to making false statements about what happened to her, setting off a media firestorm. Now, for the first time, Sherry Papini is telling her side of the story and revealing shocking new information. Sherry Papini, Caught in a Lie, an ID documentary event, Monday, May 26th at 9 on ID. Set your DVR.
So, Gibbs, let's start with our Patreon shout-outs.
Sure.
We have Kathy Davis, Jillianne Major, Hyenasaur. Then we have Betty Jackson. And I know you remember Betty Gibbs from CrimeCon.
Yep.
We took pictures with Betty, hung out with her a little bit. And Betty is the one that actually got the CrimeCon tattoo.
Pretty brave of her.
It is.
Yeah. Because what if CrimeCon's not around? Now you're stuck with a tattoo.
Yeah, but it does have her husband's fingerprint.
Yeah.
So either way, I think she's okay.
She'll be able to future scans real easy. She can just put her arm right there and scan and be good.
Then we have Rachel Cooper and Megan Marie.
Megan Marie.
It's
like two first names.
So thank you, everyone, new supporters. And as we always say, we want to thank the people that continue to stay with us month after month. It is very much appreciated.
Absolutely. Appreciate all of it.
So Gibbs, keeping with our new tradition, I want to give a shout out to one of our very early Patreon supporters, and that is Roberta Miller. Big thanks to Roberta for supporting us from the very beginning of the show.
Yeah, appreciate that.
She was one of our very first Patreon supporters. So
she's a giver.
Very much appreciated. So we do have a couple of voicemails that will play towards the end of the episode. And Gibbs, got to talk about True Crime All the Time Unsolved. Got a great episode dropping Sunday at the same time as this one.
Right.
About Greg and Bernadette Olemacher. And there was actually 48 hours made of this. So it's a very interesting case.
Some good twists and turns.
A lot of twists and turns. So make sure you check that out on Unsolved Sunday night. If you haven't done so recently, make sure you check out our website, truecrimeallthetime.com. You find all of our contact information.
Including our voicemail number.
A lot of people say that all the time. Put out the voicemail number. It's on the website under the contact section. And then also merchandising. If anybody wants any of that, there's links on the website to that as well. And then the last thing I'll say, Gibbs, is we got this Q&A episode coming up. It's probably going to drop not this week, but next week. We're going to do like a midweek. It won't replace a regular episode. It will be like an additional episode that comes out midweek.
Bonus reel.
Yeah, bonus type episode.
Going to be good, though. Not going to hold back. Just going to be kind of free form.
We haven't finalized it, so there's still time to get voicemails in if there's anybody that has been wanting to do that but hasn't sent one in yet. All right, Gibbs, are you ready to talk about Robert Charles Browne?
I am on my edge of my seat.
You're on the edge of your seat about what you already know.
About what I already know.
The thing about Robert Charles Browne, not a household name. He's not a serial killer that's probably going to roll off the tongue of people when they start naming, top serial killers. Browne has been described as polite, courteous. I mean, this is how people have talked about him.
Just a good guy.
Well, I don't know if they said he was a good guy, but they did say he was polite and courteous.
Well, that equals good guy.
It can.
Sure.
Some reports have his IQ, Gibbs, as high as 140. So as we've talked about, that is just short of where you're at.
If you give me extra time, I come through.
You can get it higher?
Yeah. Just got to allow me to have a little extra time.
So we're saying some good things about Robert Charles Browne here. The problem is he was also what you would call a disorganized thrill killer. And he actually could possibly be one of the most prolific serial killers in the history of the United States. If Browne is to be believed, his killing spree runs from 1970 all the way to 1995.
Wow. That's severe.
We've done cases like this before, Gibbs, where most of the information does not come out until after the killer is caught. But this one's even different from those that we've done like that. This one's got some real twist to it. But we're going to get into all of that. All right, Gibbs. So as we like to do, let's get into Robert Charles Browne's early life. He was born on Halloween in 1952.
That is kind of a omen.
It could be.
No.
Of course, there's a lot of people that are born on Halloween.
Yeah, I was just thinking I got a niece that was born on that, and she's wonderful. So
yeah, I don't think it's a bad omen at all. More of a weird coincidence. How about we call it that?
Yeah, we'll leave it at that.
Yeah. So he grows up in this very large family in Coushatta. And Coushatta is a small town, less than 3,000 people in northern Louisiana.
I don't think you're saying that right.
You don't think so?
Coushatta?
I'm going with Coushatta.
It sounds more Russian versus French.
Well, our track record of pronouncing names in Louisiana is not what you would call stellar.
Yeah, we're not very good at that.
So let's go. I'm going with Coushatta.
I think we'll let it run and we'll be corrected later.
And we have a lot of listeners from Louisiana because they've reached out to us before. Because it just so happens, Gibbs, there's a lot of serial killers in Louisiana. And we've touched on some of them.
It's all that swampland.
And the heat, man, the heat.
Yeah, that heat. That humid.
Just drives people drives them to do bad things or something. But back to Coushatta, which you so rudely interrupted me on. About 40 to 50 miles southeast of Shreveport. Now, Robert Browne was the youngest of 9. As I said, it's a big family. And his dad held a wide range of jobs. And when I say wide, I mean wide. I mean, he ran a dairy farm at one point. He was a janitor. And then some point later, Gibbs, he becomes a deputy sheriff there in the town that they live in. Now, Robert's mom was a homemaker, which, what else could she be, Gibbs? Got 9 kids.
9 kids, man. That's a lot.
Somebody's got to watch these 9 kids and take care of them. So that's what his mom did. One interesting fact. So I said his dad would become a deputy sheriff. One of Robert's brothers would later in life become a state trooper.
State trooper.
You just repeating what I say, or
it's a good flick.
That's Super Troopers.
Super Trooper. That's
Can we not make it through one episode where you butcher a movie?
Yeah, my bad.
He's already pulled over. He can't pull over anymore.
That's right.
Meow Gibbs, childhood was not great for Robert.
That was a good Super Trooper.
Yeah, people that like Super Troopers or have seen it will get that reference. His mom was reported to have trouble with outbursts of rage. She was called emotionally unstable. And then you had his siblings, and we mentioned he had 8 of them. And it was said that they tormented him, they humiliated him growing up. And on top of that, you have his mother reportedly allowing all of this to happen. Not just allowing it, she may have encouraged it. At the very least, Gibbs condoned it. So Gibbs, we have to talk a little bit about the triad. We haven't been able to on a lot of our recent episodes, but we have information about that on Browne. Now, he didn't have all 3 of the factors, but what he did have was torturing animals, and he was into setting fires. So he had arson as well.
Just to have the trifecta, we need bedwetting, and we don't have that. So,
yep. So he had 2 of the 3,
which is enough.
Well, I think those are the 2 big ones, right? I've never understood the bedwetting fully anyway,
right?
Because all kids wet the bed. Are you wetting the bed at 12 or 14? Is that what it is?
Or in your case, 43.
43, right?
Yeah.
But I think as far as those three elements, the two big ones for me are torturing animals and arson.
Yeah, and for me, the only one that really stands out for me is the cruelty to animals. If you're willing to do that, I think you're willing to do about anything.
I would agree with you on that. And then you and I talk a lot about people getting hit on the head. It's not part of the McDonald triad, but that seems like, at least in a lot of the episodes that we've done, a very big indicator, some type of head trauma. So as a child, Browne had several traumatic experiences in his life. The first happened on New Year's Eve in 1961. And what happened, Gibbs, was that Robert's grandfather committed suicide by throwing himself down a well.
Wow, man.
Seems like a very strange way to commit suicide. At that point, Robert would have been 9 years old. And then just a couple of years later, his aunt is brutally murdered. So we're talking about a 2-year time span, Gibbs, here, where that's a lot to take in for a kid in a short amount of time.
Yeah, for even anybody, let alone a kid.
Right. Yeah, you're right. I mean, anybody of any age, but especially a 9, 10-year-old, you have to wonder what effect those kind of very traumatic experiences had on Robert Browne, both mentally and emotionally. So if we talk about Browne in school a little bit, people would come out later and describe him as kind of a loner, but he did have friends. I mean, he wasn't a loner. He did like to keep to himself, but he had a good number of friends.
Well, he was polite and courteous.
He was polite and courteous. But the other thing that they said about him was that he had an extremely short fuse that, I mean, it could ignite at the drop of a hat. There was stories about, playing basketball in gym, and if he thought somebody fouled him, I mean, he would just go off on people. And as we said, we know the guy's fairly intelligent. He's almost as smart as you are, but he ends up dropping out of high school at the age of 16. So Browne joins the Army at 17, and he actually ends up serving Gibbs from 1969 to 1976, and he made the rank of sergeant. So he was in for quite a little bit there.
Yeah, good 7 years.
Yeah, during the Vietnam War, part of that, right? So he goes into the Army in 69, and later on, Gibbs, he's going to tell investigators that he actually committed his first murder in 1970 while he was stationed in South Korea.
Was he over there with Arthur Shawcross?
He might have been.
Because Arthur did some bad things when he was there.
Browne didn't do the same type of things in over there that Arthur Shawcross did, but allegedly he did kill somebody. But they never could corroborate this murder. So this one's really just on his word. But at the age of 17, he also gets married. And he marries a 13-year-old girl named Terry. 13 years old, Gibbs.
Yeah, that's a little strange, but you know what? Back then, maybe, I don't know back then if that was acceptable.
I wasn't thinking so. Now, if you were saying this was like the 40s or the 50s.
I'd say maybe 30s and 40s maybe, right?
Yeah, I mean, I know some people in my family, a couple generations removed, that got married very, very young.
Yeah. It's not the age difference. It's the age difference at that time. If you had somebody that was 23 and 27 get married, no big deal. 13 and 17, big deal.
Oh, yeah, I see.
Age difference is still the same.
Yeah, so it's not the number,
No.
it's how old you are
At the time.
and the
maturity level.
Yeah.
Right?
No, I got you. But in my eyes, a 13-year-old shouldn't be getting married.
No.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't have a lot of facts around the situation or, how it all went down. But, I mean, this is a real Jerry Lee Lewis type situation we got going on here. My question is, where are these girls' parents? And
Well, they could be okay with it.
And they must have been, maybe. I'm not okay with it.
Well, that's because you got a 13-year-old.
Yeah, you're right. Now, while Browne was in the Army, he actually received a good number of awards. It's like we said, he was in there for 7 years. In 73, he gets a divorce from Terry. but he marries the exact same year. And this is going to be like a revolving thing that we're going to have to talk about. He marries a Vietnamese woman named Tuet Minh Huynh. That's what I'm going with.
I was going to go with the same thing.
Were you?
Mm-hmm.
You had that same
pronunciation.
So we're spot on today.
Yeah.
Now in 1974, Robert's father dies. The same year, his first child is born with Huynh. He has a son named Thomas, but he divorces Huynh in 1976. And this is the same year that he gets a dishonorable discharge from the Army, and it was said it was around drug abuse. So in 1977, Robert Browne marries for the third time. He marries a woman named Brenda Ware. And there was a story around this marriage, Gibbs, that really indicated to me just how Browne treated these women that he married, because he beat Ware so severely at one point in the marriage early on, because none of these marriages last very long, that she barely survived.
Well, like you said, he had a temper that drop of a hat went off.
Yeah, he had a very short fuse, and apparently he had no problem taking it out on women whatsoever.
Yeah, most cowards do.
I agree with you. So this incident occurred sometime in 1980, because it was right after this that they got a divorce. So at this point, Gibbs, Browne is 28 years old. He's been married and divorced 3 times, and he has 1 child. And the reason why I think it's so important that we have to talk about some of these relationships is because it's going to come out later that these relationships, the failings, his thoughts about these women, they're going to be big drivers in why he says that he chooses his victims. So Gibbs, the same year that he divorces Brenda, he marries a woman named Rita. And just after getting married, Browne strangles this woman so badly that she ends up in the ER. And the doctor's going to come out and say that this strangulation was so bad that her larynx was almost completely crushed.
It's a lot of rage.
Yeah, a lot of rage. I like the word you used, which was coward.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could throw piece of shit in there too.
Yeah, a few other choice words.
A whole bunch of other words. Anybody that treats a woman like this deserves all those types of words.
Yep.
All in all, Gibbs, Browne is going to get married 5 times. And what I found very interesting is that when you look at the descriptions of all 5 of these women, they were very, very similar.
So he had a type.
Yeah, so you're getting into the area of the fact that he had a type. So they were all petite. All 5 weighed between 95 and 125 pounds. But Browne didn't kill any of these women. But I think you have to say, Gibbs, that all of them should consider themselves very lucky not to have had to endure some of the domestic violence and the physical abuse that they did, but lucky that they got away from this guy with their lives, knowing what we're getting ready to talk about.
Yeah. Look back, I'm sure they're real glad.
What? And that's something you and I have talked about on other podcasts. What does that feel like to somebody to know that they've had a brush? And a lot of times it's just a passing encounter. These people were married to this monster for a year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever it was.
Yeah, it'd be pretty weird. I mean, it'd be weird, like, if you did a podcast with somebody for a while and then you found out they had this stuff in their closet, that came out later.
Find out that they had a secret life that they'd been hiding from you all this time.
Yeah, involved a K-bar and travels, and
I'm sure that is going to be weird when it comes out for me.
Definitely for you.
When I have to bail you out.
Yeah, but I'm good for it.
No, you are, and that's the one good thing about you.
Yeah.
So just to touch on a little bit about what some of these women had to endure, Browne's 4th wife would come out and tell reporters that he once put a pistol to her head and pulled the trigger, but it went click.
Like the old Russian roulette?
Kinda, yeah. I don't know if it was loaded at all, right? Russian roulette's what? When there's one bullet in.
One bullet and you spin it, yeah.
You spin it and...
I think in Vietnam they called it something different. I don't remember what they called it, though.
That's a good story, then.
Yeah.
It's always a good story when you go down the path and say, but I don't
remember
what
it
it
was called.
And then Robert's fifth wife, she would tell detectives that he was very vocal to her about how much he hated women, how much he hated cops. And then you have his third wife said that he beat her one time because she forgot to put a spoon in the gravy.
Well, I mean, how are you supposed to get the gravy on the taters?
A spoon in the gravy.
But you got to get the gravy on the taters.
Now, nobody should ever be physically abused.
Never, ever.
And there's no reason for it. So I don't know how you even rank it, but that's got to be the worst reason I've ever heard of for getting upset with somebody, striking somebody, whatever the situation was.
Get up and get a spoon, buddy, and take care of it yourself.
Get your own spoon. And this same wife is the one that would label Robert Browne to police as the devil's right-hand man. And she's quoted as actually telling the police, hey, call me when you pull the switch on this guy.
Well, she wants to be there for the electrocution, huh?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think she wants a front row seat. But can you blame her? It sounds like this guy put her through hell. And not just her, every one of these women that he was married to.
I think they all would put their hand on the switch and pull at the same time.
Yeah. Hell, if you don't want to be married, just don't get married 5 times.
Yeah.
You just marrying somebody to have somebody there to beat on?
I think eventually you just have to say you're not made to be in a relationship.
Yeah, but I don't think people like that realize it.
Yeah.
I don't think they have the wherewithal.
Well, sometimes I think people chase something that they hope they'll eventually get, but the grass is not always greener on the other side, but they think it is. So they might have something that's good, but they think there's something better.
Oh, you're just talking about why he moved from one to the other. Though.
Yeah. But sometimes you got to cut your losses, man, and say, you know what, I'm not made to be in relationships because I'm just not made to be in relationships. Think about it.
And that's a nugget of wisdom from Gibby.
True Crime All the Time is sponsored by BetterHelp. You know, folks, therapy can feel like a big investment, but let's think about the state of your mind. It's just as important as your physical health. Traditional in-person therapy can cost anywhere from $100 to $250 per session, which adds up really fast. But with BetterHelp Online Therapy, you can save, on average, up to 50% per session. With BetterHelp, you pay a flat fee for weekly sessions, saving you big on cost and time. And you get quality care at a price that makes sense and can help you with anything from anxiety to everyday stress. Your mental health is worth it, and now it's within reach. I've used the BetterHelp service for years. And I love the fact that, I can connect with a therapist in a comfortable spot in my home on my laptop. With over 30,000 therapists, BetterHelp is the world's largest online therapy platform, having served over 5 million people globally. Your well-being is worth it. Visit BetterHelp.com/TCAT today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/TCATT. Even the smallest step forward can make a big difference in your financial future. When you open a Chime checking account, you're one step closer to a better financial future with no maintenance fees, fee-free overdraft up to $200, or getting paid up to 2 days early with direct deposit. Making progress has never been easier. I think we've all been in that position where we've had an overdraft. Well, with Chime, you can overdraft up to $200 with no fees. That's amazing. And they have over 50,000 fee-free ATMs. Make progress towards a better financial future with Chime. Open your account in 2 minutes at chime.com/TCAT. That's chime.com/TCATT. Chime feels like progress. Banking services and debit card provided by the Bancorp Bank N.A. or Stride Bank N.A., members FDIC. Spot me eligibility requirements and overdraft limits apply. Fees apply at out-of-network ATMs. MyPay eligibility requirements apply. Credit limits range from $20 to $500. $2 fee applies to get funds instantly. Crime checking account required. Go to chime.com/disclosures for details.
Now, Gibbs, Browne was arrested a few times in the early 80s. And every time he got caught breaking into some place that he was working at, but the most he ever got at any one time was 45 days in jail. Now, in 1985, he actually gets charged with stealing a bell from the local church. Now, come on, Gibbs. What the hell are you going to do with a bell? With a big-ass church bell?
I don't know. I spray painted once.
You vandalized a church bell?
Not a church bell, but another school's bell.
Oh, okay.
You know.
'Cause I thought you were punching your ticket right there, man.
No. I would never
Start
do that.
vandalizing a church bell.
No, just another school's bell,
So you're going to steal a bell, I guess out of the belfry or whatever you call it.
Bell tower?
The bell tower. And what are you going to do with it? It's not like you're going to sell it on the black market.
Was it like brass or something? Melt it down?
Hell, I don't know. I get tired of trying to make sense of stupid things that people do.
Yeah, it's pretty idiotic.
It's hard, I don't condone any type of stealing, but there are some that I understand better than others, right? I understand when someone's hungry and they're broke and they shove a T-bone steak in their pants and they walk out of the grocery.
Sure.
I understand that. I'm not saying it's right.
Yeah.
And I understand when people that are addicted to drugs break into a house and steal some electronics and then ultimately sell it because they're trying to get money to feed that habit.
Okay.
I don't get stealing a church bell. Maybe you're right. Maybe it was what it was made of.
Well, I'm guessing it had to be.
So this guy's got the tools or the know-how to melt it down, or
how did he get it down? Those are pretty heavy.
But he's not done stealing, because in 86, he takes a truck right off a dealership lot, as you would do. You just walk on the lot, get in the truck, and drive off. And he drives all the way to Colorado.
Now, not right, but you gotta admit, kind of cool.
Kind of badass.
Yeah, walk in and the keys are there and you just jump in and drive off and keep going.
Well, I don't know if you remember, Gibbs, and I'm sure you do, back in the day, it would have been a lot easier to do that. Nowadays, hell, you can't even get in the damn car.
Right.
They got them all locked up.
Need your driver's license.
Half the time somebody wants to go with you. I don't want some punk going with me. I want to drive the car by myself and...
Yeah, get squirrely with it.
Yeah. And in Colorado, Gibbs, he's going to meet up with an old girlfriend and one of his old buddies. And at this point, he's into drugs. And he's into drugs in a pretty big way.
He was into them because that's why he got kicked out of the military.
He was, but I don't know to what degree. It said he got kicked out for drug use or drug abuse, but I don't know to what degree.
So he's kicking it up.
He may have been pretty bad back then. I don't know. But you make a valid point. But right now he's into weed. He's into cocaine, but not just using. And he's into selling now as well. And there's a story that comes out from this friend of his in Colorado. Now, it's disgusting, but it really goes to show the mindset of Robert Charles Browne. Because one night they're in Colorado, they're out partying, and Browne ends up shooting a cow for what I guess he considered was fun, right? There's no reason to shoot this cow, but he does. And then he proceeds to slit the cow's throat and drink the blood.
Kind of like a ritual, huh?
Well, I don't know. That's not a normal Saturday night in my hometown. So, yeah, it's disgusting, but it's kind of getting to a little bit to what this guy's all about. Something's not firing.
Yeah, he's missing a cylinder.
You don't just go out and do that on a Saturday night for shits and giggles.
You tip a cow.
Yeah, cow tipping. I
you
get
don't
that.
slit a cow.
Yeah, you don't, and then you don't drink the blood.
Yeah.
So I guess back to this incident, Gibbs. What I'm not sure of is, is it a combination of drugs and maybe Robert Browne's twisted mind? I just don't know.
Yeah, a combination of, most likely, maybe.
Of the two. So he ends up getting arrested for the truck theft back in Louisiana. He gets 18 months in prison. He does about 7 of those 18.
Typical.
And gets paroled in 1987. And now, Gibbs, we're going to fast forward to 1991. And I know what everybody's going to be thinking. They're going to be thinking, Mike, Gibby, where are all the murders? You said this guy's a prolific serial killer.
Yeah.
So what you're saying too?
Yeah. In my own mind.
You know the story, right?
Yeah.
You've researched it too. We know he started killing in 1970, but we chose to do this one a little differently. And I think you'll see why when everything is said and done. Or you won't, and you'll say that we're dumbasses, and that's okay too.
Yeah, go ahead and email Mike and let him know.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to do Gibby_true crime on Twitter and just say you're a dumbass, he's fine with it. He likes it.
Or you can just tell me that you love me.
He has no problem either way. So to tell this story correctly, Gibbs, what I think you have to do is you have to start with Heather Dawn Church. And Heather Church was from Black Forest, Colorado. It's about 12 miles away from Colorado Springs. She was 13 years old at the time that she went missing in 1991. Heather was described as 5'1", 78 pounds. So we're talking about, just a little 13-year-old girl, Gibbs.
Yeah, tiny thing.
Honor student, innocent, bright, bubbly, 13-year-old girl. On September 17th, 1991, Heather was babysitting her 5-year-old brother. Her mom was out with her 2 older brothers at a Boy Scout meeting. Heather's mom called home around 8 o'clock to check on her. They had a conversation. Everything was fine. But by the time that they got home around 9:30, they only found the 5-year-old brother. He was tucked in bed. Heather was nowhere to be found. So as you can imagine, Gibbs, as you would or I would, everybody goes into panic mode. The community comes together. They're searching. The police are searching. But none of the searches by either the police or the citizens that come to help would lead to finding Heather. And it's not until 2 years later in 1993 that her skull was discovered on a road west of Colorado Springs. They were able to determine that Heather died from blows to the head, but really, aside from finding her skull, there was no clues, right? I mean, they just found a skull out in the middle of nowhere. There was nothing else that was going to help them solve this murder. The only real piece of evidence that they found was a set of fingerprints that they were able to lift off of the frame of a window screen at the church house. And at the time, they had sent the prints out to the Colorado Bureau of Investigation and to the FBI, but there were no matches. They didn't get any hits. And Gibbs, you and I talk about APHIS, right? The fingerprint database, but this was prior to APHIS. So at this point, what you had was data banks of fingerprints in each state. And then you had the FBI, they had their own data bank, but they weren't connected. You couldn't just sit at a computer terminal and access the whole thing.
So old school.
Yeah, Gibbs, I think you're right. It was a little bit old school because what they ultimately did is they ended up sending information, mailing it out to a bunch of different jurisdictions around the country. And they had photographs of the fingerprints. They also had some computer records that went with it. And it actually paid off, but not till 1995. So remember, she disappeared in 91, and it's not until 1995 that the authorities in Colorado get a match on this fingerprint and they figure out who it belongs to. And I don't think it's any secret here that it's going to be Robert Browne. And we have to go back to Browne's arrest for the stolen truck in Louisiana because this is ultimately what's going to lead to this case being solved. He was fingerprinted at the time of that arrest, and it's this unbelievable work that's done by the Colorado authorities that ends up getting that match coming back so they can figure out who it is.
We have your fingerprints from inside that house.
I don't believe you have any fingerprints in there. I mean, it's not possible. You may have somebody's that are similar to mine, but you don't have mine. I wish you'd take mine again and compare them.
We've compared them several times. We got your fingerprints from the Louisiana State Police. You know, I'm telling you, they are yours.
So that is the real interview. And you can hear Robert Browne saying, there's no way you got mine. Take them again, test them again. But they had the right guy. And the interesting thing, Gibbs, is that at the time of the disappearance of Heather Church, they realized that Robert Browne was living about a half mile from where Heather Church lived. And it was said, Gibbs, that he could actually see the church house from where he was living. So there was a theory at one point that they thought he could see the driveway and he knew whether or not people were home or who was home, or, you know, that was part of the theory that they came up with.
Right.
So they arrest Browne, and after the arrest, they search his house or his mobile home or whatever it is. And they end up finding a whole bunch of guns. They find a lot of stolen property because apparently he'd been robbing a bunch of his neighbors as well. So after the arrest, Gibbs, while they're doing background on Robert Browne, they discover back in Louisiana that there were a number of women that lived near him in Coushatta that had gone missing or had been found murdered.
Louisiana. Been there many times on our Unsolved.
Oh, there's no doubt.
A lot of women.
And there's a lot of unsolved. There's a lot of solved ones too, but there's a lot of unsolved murders down there. But at this point, you've got the police thinking that they may have a serial killer on their hands. So one of the investigators that was working this church case was a guy by the name of Lou Smith. And a lot of people may recognize that name because he was a person that came out and talked about the John Benet Ramsey case. And I think he was one of the first people, Gibbs, to really come out and say that he thought that it was an intruder that had killed John Benet. But you have him helping build this case against Robert Browne. And Lou Smith was very seasoned. And what he would say is that he had the feeling from talking to Browne that this was a guy that had done unbelievable things, bad things. So he was getting like a serial killerish type vibe. It's not a word, but I'm saying it anyway. So the prosecution is getting ready to take Browne to trial, and his defense attorney comes forward with a plea deal. And this is where Robert Browne's going to plead guilty to the murder of Heather Church in exchange for taking the death penalty off the table. Now, as I think you would have in a lot of these cases, Gibbs, the prosecution reaches out to the family, right? They're consulting with the family, and it just so happens that the Church family was not in favor of the death penalty. So they agreed to let prosecutors move forward with this deal. Browne would be convicted of first-degree murder and get sentenced to life without parole. And normally, Gibbs, this is where you and I would be starting to wrap up the case. We'd kind of be giving our opinion.
Right.
Getting ready to sign off. But this case is very different.
We're just halfway into it.
Yeah, because what happens is in 2000, Browne decides to write a letter to the El Paso County District Attorney. And this is El Paso, Colorado, not Texas. And Gibbs, you and I talk a lot about unsolved cases on our other podcast, and we're usually talking about whether or not a case will ever be solved. And I think that there's a chance that a lot of the murders that we're getting ready to talk about would probably never have been solved if it were not for what's about to come next.
I would agree.
So what you have is a cold case group is formed. They're investigating Robert Browne. He's already in prison. He's got a life sentence, but they think that he's a serial killer. You know, and part of this cold case group is this Lou Smith. And I think he's a big driver of the fact that whether it's, you call it a sixth sense, you call it intuition, or just the fact that this guy had so much experience on the force, he thinks there's more to Robert Browne than what they know about. But this is where the twist comes, Gibbs, because it's actually Robert Browne who shines the spotlight on himself, because he ends up sending a letter to prosecutors in 2000. In this letter, Browne hints at the fact of what he calls 7 opportunities. And investigators take this to be him talking about other possible murders. So the cold case group, they jump all over this. And they actually write Browne back a letter asking him about, what he means by this. Did he commit other murders? They're trying to get some more information out of him. And he actually responds with another letter. And this letter, Gibbs, is creepy, because in one part of the letter, it reads, 7 sacred virgins entombed side by side. Those less worthy are scattered wide. The score is you 1, the other team 48. If you were to drive to the end zone in a white Trans Am, the score could be 9-48. So a little freaky. Now, if you dissect the first part, the score is 1-48. I think it's safe to say that what he's talking about is they got him for 1.
Yeah, there's 47 out there that they haven't found yet.
But he's got 48. Now, the next part's a little more cryptic, where he talks about driving to the end zone in a white Trans Am. The score could be 9, meaning they could find 8 more.
Sounds like it. 8 more fairly easy if they knew where to look. Well, he also talks about the 7 sacred virgins laying side by side, or entombed side by side. So it sounds like he's got 7 that are located in one spot, and then the rest of them are all, individually murdered throughout. But it sounds like there's 7 that must have been, the remains must have been put together in some sacred spot.
I think you can interpret these a couple of different ways. It is a little cryptic, but along with the letter, Browne includes a hand-drawn map. And on the map, he has outlined the states of Colorado, Washington, California, New Mexico, Texas, Oklahoma, Louisiana, Arkansas, and Mississippi. So we got quite a few states here, Gibbs. And inside the outline of each state, he's written a number. And the number is meant to indicate the body count that he racked up inside each one of these states. So we talked about his first murder, and that was him claiming to have killed somebody while he was in South Korea back in 1970. On top of that, he would claim that he murdered 7 people in Texas, 9 in Colorado, 17 in Louisiana. That's a big number. 3 in Mississippi, 5 in Arkansas, and 2 in California, Oklahoma, and New Mexico, and then a single person in Washington. And I know where you're going, Gibbs, with Louisiana. You want to tie some of those into the different unsolved that we've done.
Yeah, we've done a few unsolved down there, and just wondering if that's him.
Yeah, you just never know. That's a big number, though. 17 people in Louisiana. Now, if all of this is true, what Robert Browne claims, this would make him, like we said, one of the most prolific serial killers in United States history. Because you have Gary Ridgway that confessed to 48 murders. And this was back in 2003. I mean, what Browne did would put him, up there, if not just past Gary Ridgway.
Yeah, he'd be in the mix for sure.
So as you can imagine, this piqued the interest of this cold case team in a big way. And they try to get Browne to open up. Now, initially, he's kind of unwilling to talk, but they do get him to agree to have discussions with them. And eventually he's going to start providing details about some of these murders. Now, some of this is done, Gibbs, and you and I have talked about this before, by giving him things that he wants. If that solicits the truth, I don't have a huge problem with it, because you're getting closure for families that don't know what happened to their loved ones. What I have a problem with is giving a killer that has a life sentence for killing a little 13-year-old girl extra privileges for making shit up.
Right.
And that's what you got to kind of weigh, I guess, when you do this thing. First of all, you have to size up how honest you think this guy's being, and then you have to weigh this person getting extra privileges versus being able to tell somebody what actually happened to their wife, their daughter, their son, whoever it is, after a lot of years of not really knowing whatever happened to them.
Yeah, I'm not as worried, because I just say throw them in general population when you send them off to prison.
When he's done getting his extra privileges?
Yeah, send them off the general population and let things happen.
Let the chips fall where they may?
Yeah.
That's the Gibby way.
That's exactly when it comes to this stuff.
And I don't think you're alone in that. I don't think that there's a lot of people that would disagree with you.
Yeah, prison rules take care of certain things themselves.
A man that kills a 13-year-old girl, I don't think there's a lot of people that give a rat's ass what happens to somebody like that. I really don't.
Yeah, well, they shouldn't.
Now, I'm a compassionate person, but not for that.
No.
My compassion kind of goes out the window when you start talking about things like that.
You know, my wife and I do a lot of shopping online, and we always use Rakuten. Rakuten is the smartest way to save money when you shop, because you earn cash back at over 3,500 stores. We're talking fashion, beauty, electronics, home essentials, travel, dining, concert tickets, and more. Your favorite stores like Macy's, Nike, Sephora, Dyson, and Lowe's. And that's just to name a few. Pay Rakuten to send them shoppers, and Rakuten then passes on a part of that payment to its members as cashback. Cashback is deposited directly into your PayPal account, or Rakuten can send you a check. You can even maximize your savings by stacking cash back on top of other deals, like store sales and coupons. You're already shopping at your favorite stores. Why not save while you're doing it? It really is a no-brainer. Membership is free, and it's easy to sign up. Get the Rakuten app now and join the 17 million members who are already saving. Cashback rates change daily. See Rakuten.com for details. That's Rakuten. Your cash back really adds up. Hey folks, see if you've ever had this problem. You're trying to eat a little healthier, but you're in the grocery store aisle, you're looking at packaging, nutrition labels, and they're so confusing, you don't know what's good for you and what's not. Well, this is why I love Thrive Market, my go-to online grocery store for getting all of my healthy essentials delivered, and I don't even have to leave my couch. Finding better options for the whole family is easy with Thrive Market's Healthy Swap Scanner. Just scan a product, and it instantly recommends healthier swaps. This is how my wife and I found our new favorite snack, IQ bars. Sometimes I eat one in the morning with my coffee, sometimes just later on in between meals. They also have so many on-site filters that make it simple to shop by the needs of everyone in the family. Maybe you have someone who needs gluten-free food, somebody that has a peanut allergy. Well, no more scouring ingredient labels when you can just filter it all on Thrive Market. My wife and I often use the high protein filter to stock up on things like Sieti chips. Ready to make the switch? Go to thrivemarket.com/TCAT for 30% off your first order, plus a free $60 gift. That's THRIVE market.com/TCATT, thrivemarket.com/TCAT.
So they're talking to Browne. He's giving them details. But again, at the same time, he's getting a lot of extra perks. And part of it, Gibbs, would be like, he'll say, give me this, and I'll tell you about 3 murders. And then after that, he would ask for something else in exchange for details about a certain number of murders. And at one point, the cold case crew and the investigators, They asked Browne whether any of his victims ever got away. And Browne answers none ever got away. I never gave them the opportunity. He said, if you're going to do it, just do it. That's some cold-hearted shit right there. So one thing that would come out from Browne as he was talking about the killings is he said that he rarely ever planned any of his killings. He chose all of his victims at random. He met his victims in just everyday types of settings, motel bars, convenience stores. There was one situation in particular where he said that he had worked as a maintenance man at an apartment complex, and he had changed the locks on one of his victims' apartments. So I get that, Gibbs, and that makes somebody very hard to catch, right? You and I have talked about that before. But the murder that he got caught for was not random. It can't be very random if you live less than a half a mile away from the victim and you have line of sight to the victim's home.
Right. Too convenient.
So when it's all said and done, the investigators are going to have a 44-page affidavit that paints this whole picture of Robert Browne, how he met his victims, mostly women, there were a few men, and how he killed them. You know, he said he used different types of guns. Sometimes he would use blunt force trauma and he would beat his victims to death. And we're going to get into some of these because there are some that have been corroborated that we can talk about. And like some other killers, there were a lot of killings that he said he committed, but he couldn't remember names. He couldn't remember enough details where anybody could ever really say for sure that his story was true because he didn't really have the whole story.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if I was out killing 48 people in 25 years, I'm not really sure how much detail I would remember.
I would agree. I mean, I think if you killed one person, now we're being hypothetical here.
Yeah, let's go hypothetical.
You would remember that for the rest of your life. I believe.
Yeah, I think you remember what you did with your knife.
I think you'd remember every detail.
Yeah. How you cleaned it up.
Whether it was on purpose, accidental, whatever it was.
Accidental
In your case. I think you would remember every detail. It wouldn't be something you'd forget.
Yeah, I think if you're just talking one or two. Starts to get the fuzzy around 3.
Let's say you're a psychopath. You're a serial killer. Killing doesn't mean anything to you. I don't think a lot of those things are going to stand out, maybe, as much as they would to somebody like myself, who is a normal person with normal feelings.
Sure.
A normal level of empathy towards others.
Yeah.
No, but I agree. I think we're on the same page there.
Unless you're like a BTK that kept a scrapbook, right?
Yeah, and he was just so meticulous. So, Gibbs, we talked about investigators being able to corroborate some of his information with independent evidence. And they were able to do that to some murders in Louisiana, Texas, Arkansas, and Colorado. All in all, they would say that there were 19 murders that Browne claimed he committed where the information that he gave was knowledge that only the killer or an investigator could have known.
So there's some validation behind it.
There really is. And that's why I say, now I'm not saying all 48, but 19 in and of itself is a lot. So if they think the 19 is true, there's a good chance that number is a lot higher when you get to some that he can't remember the details of.
Yeah, I think you can probably safely say maybe 30.
That's what I was thinking.
Benefit of the doubt, 30. Yep. But yeah, I think it could be every one of the 48.
Yeah, because what happened is some of them, even where he had the details, you know, let's say he would say that he dumped a body in a certain place. Well, let's say it was a body of water. Well, they couldn't find the body. But that doesn't mean he didn't kill somebody.
Right.
And it doesn't mean he didn't dump them right where he said he did.
And 48 is a big number, but it's not a big number over 25 years.
No, yeah.
It's 2 a year.
Two
right?
a year, yeah. I mean, you're scaring me, but
No,
I
was just
get what
saying.
you're saying.
I mean, it's a tragic thing. I'm not.
No, I get that. I know
I'm
you're
just
not
saying,
that.
it's for somebody like that, twice a year.
But really, you're 100% correct, because killing 50 people is almost unbelievable when you think about it in totality.
Sure.
But when you say that you've been doing it for 25 years, 2 people a year, it doesn't sound the same.
Yeah, right.
Right? I mean, it still sounds horrible. Don't get me wrong.
Oh, absolutely.
But if we're talking just about the mechanics of it, could somebody do it to kill
Yes.
2 people a year?
Yeah, they could do it.
A serial killer could easily do that. If
Yeah.
they could get away with it for 25 years, they could kill many more people. I'm actually, to be honest with you, Gibbs, I'm surprised that the number in the United States is not higher than what it is. I really am. And I think it probably is. We just don't know about
We
it.
just don't know about it, right?
All right, Gibbs. So it's time to talk about some of the murders that they believe are linked to Browne. And the first one we're going to talk about is Catherine Fuzzy Hayes. She went by Fuzzy. Now, she was from Coushatta, Louisiana, only 15 years old. And she went missing on the 4th of July back in 1980. So we're going back and we're going to run through the timeline of when these girls went missing that the police are pretty certain Browne had something to do with.
Yeah, this is where we're getting in, where we talked about a little bit different than our normal format.
Yeah, we're doing it a little bit backwards, but we almost had to because of the strange way
Yeah.
that his murders are discovered. I mean, he's almost like saying, hey, here, I did this in a very strange way. And Catherine's remains would be discovered by a hunter on October 16th, 1980. And this is what Browne says. He says that he met the girl. Now, he only knew her as Fuzzy. He didn't know her real name, but it was corroborated that she went by Fuzzy. He met her at Uncle Albert's chicken stand, offered her a ride and a place to stay. He ends up taking her to his mother's house, and they have sex. What he claims is consensual. But after that, he ends up strangling her with leather shoelaces. And what he says is that he puts her body in the trunk of his car and he dumps her off a bridge into a creek near Montgomery, Louisiana. So some of these early murders, Gibbs, these were people that were in his hometown. Some lived very close to him, and the murders were never solved until, he starts giving
Details?
Now, he's not going to be convicted of the murder of Fuzzy. And in fact, he's only going to be convicted of one murder. And we'll talk about it a little later, but I do want to throw that out there.
Is it because they only find the skeleton remains and not an actual body that would have any type of evidence on it?
I think you're onto something. I just don't think they have enough evidence in general, beyond what he's telling them. They don't have the evidence to convict beyond a reasonable doubt. That's what I think. And you make a good point. The remains that they found were skeletal. It's not going to tell you probably a lot about how she died because she was strangled. So the next person we have to talk about is Faye Self. And she too was from Coushatta, 26 years old, 5'2", 100 pounds. Now, Gibbs, we go back to the beginning. We were talking about Browne's wives. They all fell in this type of range, characteristic-wise. And you mentioned that, well, that's his type. I think it was his type.
Yeah, it seems like it.
I think you were right on the money about that. So Faye disappeared on March 30th, 1983, and Gibbs, her remains would never be found. And she would ultimately be declared dead in 91. And the very interesting thing about this situation is that Faye lived in an apartment complex that was owned by Robert Browne's brother. And Robert also lived in the apartment complex in a building that was right next to hers. Now, what he would tell investigators is that he met Faye at a bar called Alice's Wagon Wheel, but he later entered her apartment through an unlocked door. He took a rag soaked in chloroform, placed it over her nose and mouth, but it wasn't really chloroform, Gibbs. What it really was some type of commercial ant killer.
Yeah, there's a few different things you can use for sure.
Well, it must have done the job because it knocked her out. He goes, leaves and gets a rope, ties her up. He ends up having sex with her while she's tied up, but she ends up dying. Now, what Browne thinks is that he used too much chloroform, but I think she died from this ant killer.
Yeah, sounds like it.
So he comes back into the apartment, gets the body, puts her in the trunk of his car, and again disposes of the body off of a bridge in the nearby river. And we've talked a lot about this on Unsolved. There are a lot of rivers in Louisiana that make for good places to dispose of bodies. And you also got gators and...
A lot of gators.
So the next person we have to talk about, Gibbs, is Wanda Faye Hudson, also from Coushatta, 20 years old, 5'6", 125 pounds. And normally I would not read off the statistics like that, but the reason that I put it in is just to show that he had a type. He was stalking these women. Now, he said that these were all random, and they might have been random, but it still means he has a type. There's no doubt about that, Gibbs, when you look at...
Unconsciously, maybe.
Yeah.
Or purposely.
Or purposely, yeah. Either way. She was also a neighbor, and she died from multiple stab wounds, was found on May 28th, 1983. So again, he's killed several people that were neighbors. Nobody's put it together yet.
And I don't get that, you know? All these people around town showing up missing, that they can't tie it all in.
Well, and especially these people in this apartment complex that was owned by his brother, because Browne was the maintenance man. You would think he would be looked at. And Wanda was the person, and we kind of touched on it earlier. This is the one where he had changed her lock the previous day. And so he returned the next night and had the key. And again, he ends up knocking her out by using what he calls chloroform. Most likely was some kind of ant killer. But she didn't die from that because he did stab her several times with a screwdriver.
Wow.
And that's brutal.
That is brutal.
To think about. I mean, it'd be brutal to get stabbed with anything, but a screwdriver. Now, he would later tell investigators, as he's recounting all of this, that this was a spur-of-the-moment killing. But to me, Gibbs, the facts don't actually back that up. Now, maybe it was a spur-of-the-moment when he thought about it when he was changing her locks, but to me, it's not spur-of-the-moment when, okay, I've got the key, I'm going to come back the next night, I'm bringing chloroform. You know, that's not... To me, that's not spur of the moment. There's some planning there.
Yeah, that's premeditation.
Yeah,
sure.
I don't call that spur of the moment at all. So the next victim is Nida Mendoza, and we're out of Louisiana at this point. We're in Sugar Land, Texas. And Nida was only 17 years old, 5 foot tall, 95 pounds. And she went missing February 2nd of 84, and they found her just 4 days later. And what Browne would tell the investigators later on is that he met Nida at a dance club where she worked as a topless dancer. And what he says is that they agreed to have sex for money. And at this point in Texas, Gibbs, he's driving this white van that he used in this job making deliveries for some kind of silk flower wholesaler. And he says he took Nida to a motel, and this motel was right off of US 59 in Houston, and it was not very far from where Nida lived. And Browne says that they did have sex, and then after that he strangled her He put her body in a bathtub in the hotel room, and he set to dismember her. He cut off her legs up at the thighs, and he cut off her head. So again, when we talk about that this guy killed in a variety of ways, he really did. I mean, you're talking about strangulations, stabbings. Now he's into dismemberment.
Well, he's taking it up a level.
Well, yeah, he hasn't dismembered anybody yet. But what he does with her body is he puts the pieces into a suitcase. And then he walks through the hotel lobby carrying the suitcase with these body parts inside. He couldn't fit all of them in the suitcase. So he got out to his van, dumped the body parts in the van, went back to the room, gathered up the rest of the body parts, put those in the suitcase, and he did that as many times as he needed. I don't know how many times he did it, but just think about that, Gibbs.
Pretty gross, man.
Well, it is. And to walk around with a suitcase knowing that it contains the body parts of an individual that you've just murdered.
I mean, I get why he did it. It's just gross.
Yeah, no, he's trying to get away with the murder. I get that part. But I'm thinking in my head that to him, this is no different than, you or I checking out of a hotel. We've got our bag, we're putting it in the trunk, and we're getting ready to go home.
It's like you at CrimeCon when you took all those towels.
In the nice robe?
Yeah. You put them in your bag, got them out to your car and your truck, and unloaded them, went back and got the rest of them.
But it's just that thought that to him, this is nothing more than that.
Yeah, it shows you how little he values a human.
A human life, yeah.
Right.
I absolutely agree with you. So he takes the body parts to a field in Sugar Land and dumps them. And then 4 days later, there's a man who is searching for his hubcap that had flown off his car. And he's out in the field looking for this hubcap, and he stumbles upon these body parts.
Can you imagine?
No, I was going to say, so this is a person that has normal types of feelings, Gibbs. This would devastate somebody, I would think.
Well, I think you saw a cut off leg or a head. I think it would freak the shit out of you.
Yeah. So the next victim we need to talk about, Melody Ann Bush. She was also from Sugar Land, 22 years old, 5'9", 120 pounds. She was last seen somewhere around March 18th into March 19th, 1984. Witnesses would say that she was barefoot, had been drinking, she was intoxicated, and she walked out of a place called the Stag Bar. Nobody ever saw her again. She was declared missing March 30th. And they would find her body in a culvert along the highway that very same day, just north of a place called Flatonia. And at the time, Gibbs, authorities, they couldn't figure out what had killed her. And then they did the autopsy. And the autopsy comes back and lists the cause of death as acute acetone poisoning.
That's like the stuff my daughter uses to take her nail polish off.
Yeah, it's exactly what is in nail polish remover. And I think it's in like paint remover and things like that. Now, what happens early on in this investigation is that they start to look at her husband, Robert, because I guess they had both been drinking that night together. They got in an argument, but they could never come up with any evidence that tied Robert to the murder. Now, what Browne would say is that he was staying at the same hotel as Melody, and he gave her a ride back to the hotel after she had gotten into this fight with her husband.
So this is good. So you got witnesses seeing the husband and the wife fighting, and then she shows up murdered. So they go after him hard, I would think.
Yeah, because he's the last person witnesses see her with.
Yeah.
He is her husband. We know that, a lot of times that's the first person that's looked at. But Browne says that they go to his room, they have sex, and again, he always talks about it being consensual. Now, whether it was or not, I don't know. But he makes a point when he talks to investigators to stress that the sex in all these encounters was consensual. But I don't know how it was, Gibbs, because we talked about it earlier. He tied one of these ladies up. That's not consensual.
No.
And again, Browne says that he placed some kind of rag over her nose and mouth, and then he stabbed her in the chest with an ice pick.
Nice guy.
But I think that's where you get the autopsy report about the acetone, right? So whatever he put on the rag caused that to get into her system. But you would think it would have been pretty easy to tell that she was stabbed in the chest with an ice pick. So that had to have been on the autopsy report as well.
You would think.
So Gibbs, now I want to talk about Rocio Sperry. And she was from Colorado Springs, Colorado. So we've gone from Louisiana. He's moved to Texas. Now he's up into Colorado. She was only 15 years old, 5'4", 104 pounds. But at the time, she was married to a soldier, and she had a daughter. She was last seen in Colorado Springs, November 10th, 1987, driving a gray and white Pontiac Grand Am. Now, I mentioned her husband was a soldier. He was stationed at Fort Carson, but at the time, he had taken their daughter and was visiting family in Florida. She ultimately gets reported missing on November 15th, and her remains were never found. So now Browne comes in, and he's telling the investigators that Rocio came into this convenience store where he was working, and they would talk, and she was telling him about some of the things that were going on with the family. I guess her and her husband weren't getting along all that well, and he told investigators that she said that her husband was out of town with their daughter. She was all alone, and she actually agrees to go to the movies with him. Browne says that they go to the movies, and then after that, back to his apartment, they have sex. He strangles her, puts her body in the bathtub, and dismembers her. And this time, he does it at the joints. But he takes all of the body parts, puts them in trash bags, and then puts them in the dumpster behind his apartment.
Wow.
Now, what he would tell investigators is that he knew that the pickup schedule was the very next day. And that's why he felt comfortable putting the body parts in the dumpster, because he knew they weren't going to be there very long. Now, one thing we have to talk about, Gibbs, Rocio, she was supposed to pick her husband up at the airport. He was flying back in with their daughter from Florida, and she never shows up. So the husband goes to the apartment. There's no sign of his wife. Who's the first person that police is going to look at? The husband.
Yep.
And in this case, they really do. And it changes his life because he's a suspect, or let's say he's suspected of this murder all the way up until the time that Browne comes forward with this information. So you have that, living your life with all of these people thinking that you probably killed your wife. Then you have your baby girl growing up wondering whether or not her father murdered her mother.
Yeah, man.
Can you imagine that?
No. I mean, how terrible could that possibly be?
I mean, I really feel for this guy, Gibbs, because to be in a situation like that, knowing you had nothing to do with it, and your life is essentially turned upside down, ruined.
Yeah.
Over something that somebody else did.
There's not somebody that comes to you later and say, oh, man.
I feel bad that I thought.
Yeah, you were always right, and we didn't believe you, and let's hit the redo button so you can restart your life. And, no, it doesn't work that way.
But this is the murder that Browne would ultimately plead guilty to in 2006. And he would get another life sentence on top of the one that he already had. And the reason why this was important is because we talked about the fact that they had taken off the death penalty in the Heather Church case, and they were desperately trying to get him on another count of murder just in case anything went wrong, let's say in one of the appeals or, Gibbs, anything like that in the first one.
Yeah, they want him. Contingency plan.
Yeah, the last thing in the world they wanted was this guy out on the street. They knew he was a bad guy. It was just a matter of getting enough evidence to pin something on him. So there's one more, Gibbs, that we have to talk about that police or investigators are pretty confident about, and this is Lisa Lowe. And this actually happened in West Memphis, Arkansas. In 1991, she was 21 years old, 5 foot tall, 125 pounds. So again, every one of these women that we've listed, they have been so similar. Now, some have been a little taller.
Yeah, we had the tallest one of 5'9".
Yeah, but weight-wise,
Yeah.
they have been in such a small range. It's eerie about what his type was. So she's reported missing November 3rd, 91. Her body would be discovered November 26th, 91. And at the time, they couldn't determine her cause of death. Lisa's last known whereabouts center around her leaving her boyfriend's house and heading into Memphis to go to a nightclub. Now, Browne would say that this is where he met her. And the two of them would leave the nightclub, drive to Arkansas to a wooded area right off the highway. And Browne says that she performed oral sex on him and that he strangled her afterwards. And he was a little fuzzy on this one because he thought he may have shot her as well. He would later dump her body in the St. Francis River, but that's a lot of women. And that's a lot of cold cases. Now, really only the Perry case is officially solved. He got convicted of that. But you have to think that, I don't want to call it closure, Gibbs, but there's some type of comfort in just the knowledge maybe of what happened to some of these people for their families.
Yeah, I would say so. I mean,
rather
closure.
than not knowing at all.
Yeah. I think that's the worst thing, not knowing. For
Yeah, I mean,
years and years and years.
Well, it's horrible that it happened, obviously, but then to not know exactly what happened and to not know who was responsible for it, that's another kind of hell. So Gibbs, as we start to wrap up, I want to talk a little bit about how Browne was able to get away with some of these murders, regardless of what the number is, right? We're never going to know the real number. But my thought is it's probably pretty high. Whether it's 19 or whether it's 48, it's a big number.
Yeah, it is. And I think it's higher than the 19.
I do too, honestly. The investigators come out and they talk about all the different ways that they use to track criminals. And, one of them is by using credit and job history and things like that, right? To pin down someone's timeline, where they were at some certain point in time. The problem with Robert Browne is that he was traveling a lot back and forth in some of these delivery type jobs that he had. If you're traveling a lot from one place to the other, and in the case of Browne, he's stopping at a hotel, he's going to these bars, it's giving him an opportunity far away from home in some cases to target people, and women in particular.
Kind of makes for a successful killer if you're more mobile.
Oh, there's no doubt.
I mean, kind of like before we start recording, we were kind of talking about the success rate of a serial killer depends on how mobile they are, I think, in a morbid way.
I think it has a lot to do with it, because if you look back at some of the people we've profiled, Gibbs, Israel Keys, and now he was mobile in a different way.
Yeah, it was extreme mobile.
Yeah, that was extreme mobility.
Yeah.
Tommy Lynn Sells was hopping all over state to state. There's no doubt that makes it harder to track these people, to pin them down to certain locations at certain times. Now, when Browne would talk about, he didn't call it trolling. He called it looking for opportunities. And I'm using my air quotes. I haven't used them in a while.
Yeah, you got them up there pretty high.
So that's what he called when he was out looking for victims, looking for opportunities. And I think you could probably say that about a lot of serial killers, right? When the opportunity arises, they seize it. But him being a truck driver, and a delivery driver and things like that,
It aids in the convenience of.
I think it does. The other thing that investigators thought was that he never spent very much time with his victims, right? A lot of these things that we're talking about, he may have picked them up at a bar, but he ends up killing them that night very quickly.
Well, you keep from having that, relationship with them.
Right. So what it does a lot of things. Limits the amount of time that people have to see you with them.
Yep.
Connect you with them, things like that. One more thing that investigators really talked about a lot was that how adept Robert Browne was at disposing of bodies. That was something that they really thought aided him in his ability to get away with what he did for such a long time. At one point, an investigator was asking him in prison about how he did what he did. How did he go about it? And he told the investigator that he never went looking for anyone. And this goes back to opportunity. He just waited for an opportunity to present itself, and that's when he would strike. So the investigator says, "So you never had a plan ever?" And he says, "Nope, never." But Gibbs, there's no doubt that Robert Browne was a monster, regardless of what the ultimate number turns out to be. But when you hear some of the cold case investigators talk about Browne, one of them actually said, he's very intelligent, very respectful. He never cusses, and he's always courteous.
That's how we started the podcast out.
Right.
Polite
We use the
and
word
courteous.
We use the word courteous, and he's provided them with extensive details on a lot of these murders, enough so that they believe that he committed whatever the number is.
And I get what you're saying. I just have a hard time thinking of polite and courteous, but yet a monster. I mean, this guy was truly a monster.
Yeah, but I go back to somebody like Bundy. Bundy had a side to him that was, all smiles, fresh face, friendly. And how did Robert Browne, who was no Bundy, let me tell you, in the area of looks, how was he able to engage all of these women? Now, if it really was consensual.
Yeah, that's air quotes again, I guess, right?
Yeah, I am using air quotes. Because he says it is, but we don't know that.
Right.
That would mean to me that he was either a very smooth talker or had a manner or a way about him where he was able to disarm women or charm them or whatever it was.
Yeah, or he got a hold of them. They didn't like what he wanted to do. His temper, which we knew was quick to ignite, did. And then he strangled them or stabbed them or whatever after he sexually assaulted them. And then for kicks, he said, "Oh, let me dismember you."
Well, and I think that's something that you can never know.
Right.
So he could be telling the truth about the fact that he killed these women. He could be telling the truth about how he killed them. And what he could be doing is lying about the part before it.
Right.
And making himself out to look better than what he really is, right? He doesn't want to come out and say, "I abducted somebody and I sexually assaulted them."
Right.
So that whole part could be a lie. I don't know. But that's some of that stuff, I just don't know if there's any way that you could ever know it.
No.
But that's the case of Robert Charles Browne.
Charlie Browne.
Yeah, Gibbs likes to call him Charlie Browne. An unbelievably bad guy. I mean, even Gibbs, if he only committed the two, the guy's a monster.
Yeah.
But I think the number is so much higher.
Oh, I agree. I think it's north of 30.
I think it's so much higher. But, an unbelievable monster that I really didn't know much about, because this is not a guy that I'd heard a lot about. He's not one that I think you hear a lot of people talking about. So I thought it was pretty interesting. So Gibbs, before we go, we have a couple of voicemails. Let's check those out.
Hey, Mike and Gibby. This is Matt. I live in New Albany, Ohio, but I'm actually an Alter High School grad. Just want to call in and say I love the podcast. You guys were actually the first podcast I started listening to. Bill Comey from what used to be New Rome, Ohio. That would be a good one for Unsolved, or maybe the Lewington Brothers, the 22 Caliber Killers for true crime. Love the podcast. I look forward to it because my work week actually starts Sunday night, so that's kind of the highlight that I get to listen to it at work. Thanks a lot. Keep up all the good work.
I love that voicemail, man. Our Alter is right down the road.
Yeah, New Albany, just an hour
and a half, maybe?
Yeah.
Not too far. So we appreciate that, and we'll look into those cases. I don't think I've ever heard of either one.
No. Definitely put them on the list.
Yep, sounds interesting.
This is Megan from Kentucky. Just wanted to say I am a huge fan of your all's, and I have just binge listened for the past 2 days at work, probably about 14 hours. So keep up the great work. Look forward to hearing more from you all. Keep your own time ticking. Much love from Kentucky.
Oh, thank you, Megan, so much. We appreciate that. And anybody that knows me knows how much I love Kentucky. Go Wildcats.
I'm kind of thinking Megan's more of a Team Gibby person.
You think?
I think so.
She might be Team Fergie, though, after
I
she
don't know.
finds out how much I love the Wildcats.
Yeah, but my family grew up in Kentucky.
So did mine.
Yeah, but mine grew up on closer to Megan.
Anyway, Megan, we appreciate it. 14 hours straight. Ooh.
Yeah, that's great.
That's like having Gibby in your lap in the car.
We'll leave it at that.
All right, Gibbs, that is it for another episode of True Crime All the Time. So for Mike
and Gibby,
stay safe and keep your own time ticking.
In the early hours of December 4th, 2024, CEO Brian Thompson stepped out onto the streets of Midtown Manhattan.
This assailant pulls out a weapon and starts firing at him.
We're talking about the CEO of the biggest private health insurance corporation in the world.
And the suspect,
he has been identified as Luigi Nicholas Mangione,
became one of the most divisive figures in modern criminal history.
It was targeted, premeditated, and meant to sow terror.
I'm Jesse Weber, host of Luigi, produced by Law and Crime and Twist. This is more than a true crime investigation. We explore a uniquely American moment that could change the country forever.
He's awoken the people to a true issue.
Finally, maybe this would lead rich and powerful people to acknowledge the barbaric nature of our healthcare system.
Listen to Law and Crime's Luigi exclusively on Wondery Plus. You can join Wondery Plus in the Wondery app, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts.